Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you for yet again another Film Fanatic show. So, hope everyone's doing good. It is Thursday at 11 o'clock. It's a pretty nice sunny day. Pretty chilly out still. It is springtime, but it's still pretty chilly. So, hope everyone's doing good. Thanks again for some of the new subscribers and people commenting on this channel and or on the videos. Really great. Really love having a dialogue. I love that people are kind of digging these videos, and have an interest in all things movies. And again, I would always trying to mix certain things up. Always trying to mix up the content of the videos and trying to bring variety, but always keeping a focus on some certain genres. But yesterday I had announced that I was going to the movies, and I went to go see the new Nick Cage movie, Renfield. I saw that last night with my great friend Erin Kirkpatrick, who is pretty much a fellow. She's a great, an amazing person, really great friend. But she's also way into movies, and it's funny because when we first met, probably maybe like 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, I used to help run this open mic at this really great place. It's been closed, Fog Bar and Grill in Rockland. It's been closed for a while, ever since the pandemic. There's lots of rumors, and I think a pretty strong indication that they will be opening this year. Nothing confirmed yet, but that will be really exciting if that place opens back up, and we'll see what happens. I have a really long history tied to Fog. Really, really long history, and I look at that place as being, well, a real workshop for me as a musician. I look at it as it was also a springboard for my band Quantum. We're basically, since we had started Quantum, that was kind of where we kind of carved out a little thing, and we kind of made it into an actual thing, an actual band. And we've played as a band, as Quantum, like we've played so many shows there. So, and Ashley Seelig, the owner, has been a real key figure in giving us that chance. So, I've always felt, a sense of loyalty to that place. I've had so many fun times going there. I've seen lots of great music there. The food was always great. Always a very cool atmosphere, very cool people who work there. But I always had a pretty cool connection with Ashley. And it was funny because literally the first time I ever performed out live, the first gig I ever had as Quantum it was even in the phase of where, when I first started Quantum, it was just me. And then eventually my great friend Mike Whitehead joined up, and we became a duo. But from the first inception of that group, or the band, it was just me. And my first gig I ever did was on a live radio show. I did a set, like a 45-minute set on WERU, and that was like literally a test run to see if I could, actually do this and actually, maybe make it into something that's, a possible like living, breathing band, or something that we could maybe gig with. And we did that. I did that show on the radio, and I got a lot of good feedback and encouragement. And then that happened, so it kind of became a thing. At that point, it was kind of a band. And during that time, I was going to Fog. Fog had just opened maybe a year after that or so, and I was going there right when they opened, and had a always liked the place. I was playing in a band at the time that almost at one point had a gig there. It didn't really work out, but we almost had a gig there. And we kept in touch. I kept in touch with the people at Fog and also Ashley. And at the time, they had an open mic that had been running there since basically since they started. They had an open mic that ran, almost probably one of the longest open mics that I know of as far as how long it had run. Probably almost 6 years. And when they first started the open mic there, it was probably a year after they started. So I remember going down there and seeing if I could get a Quantum gig there. So I, decided to go there, and they had said, "Well, come to this open mic and play." So I ended up going down there, just myself, and it was the first time I was going to do this Quantum thing in public. And they said, "Well, if you come down to this open mic and play, and if we dig your material and if it works out or whatnot, maybe we'll give you a gig or something." So I was like, "Great!" I jumped at the chance. I went to the open mic. I signed myself up, and again at this time it was just me solo. So I went up and I did. I think I did like a tiny little set. I did like maybe two or three songs at the most. And I tried to keep the set pretty short because it was an open mic. And I set up and I played. And I remember Mike Whitehead, who plays in the band, plays bass, and is also responsible for all of the albums that we've done and lots of different things. He was there, and it was a good. It felt like being it was the first time. It worked out pretty well. And it was super nerve wracking. But anyway, I ended up getting our first gig there. They seemed to like what I was doing and whatnot. Plus, I was doing all original music. I didn't really do, it wasn't like a DJ thing. So I ended up booking a gig, and then if fast forward, you know, um, and it was winter time when I went to the open mic. But fast forward a couple of months out, we had booked the gig, and it was like in the spring, summertime, kind of like this time of year, maybe a little bit later in the year. So I had plenty of time to get ready for it and put something together, put together a full set. And at that point, during that time, Mike had joined the ranks of the band, and then we started kind of developing our sound. And we played, I don't know, we played about 4 or 5 different gigs as Quantum during that period. They gave us these gigs where we were playing on these off nights, like Thursdays and then some Wednesdays. And some of the gigs went really, really well. And then we ended up doing a couple of other odd day gigs, like where we played on a Sunday. We played like outside and during the summer solstice and did a couple other things. And it was cool. And then a bunch of time went by. Well, actually, a few years went by, and we didn't play there for maybe a couple of years. And I started doing this open mic there, and that's where I met Aaron. And so, and then during that time, during the open mic, after about a year or two, we started playing again at Fog, and then the last 3 or 4 years that things were going on there, we basically got a residency gig there as Quantum, and we were playing there bi-monthly, or actually every month, sometimes more than once a month, and we kept up that kind of a gig for almost 2 years, and it was great. I mean, it was such a cool experience because I felt like as a band we got to test run a lot of new things, and we got to got to really develop our material. So and then so we did that for a long time. We played a lot of gigs there, and then the pandemic hit. Obviously, we didn't play at all. And then this past summer, we ended up started playing there again, but at their adjacent business, which is Lulu's, is an ice cream place, and we started playing all these gigs outside. So, and we'll see if we can continue doing some more music there this year. We'll see. I'm really excited at the prospect. But anyway, that's where I met Erin. And when I met Erin, she's a fabulous musician, really great singer, just an amazing person, super funny and just great. But I remember one day when I first met her, we started chit chatting at the bar or something, and I think one of the we started talking about Marvel movies, and then that was what brought us together. We had this. She was really at the time into Marvel movies, and I was too, and I still am. But that's what happened, and then we had this connection from there, and it was movies through films, and and then we started to like become friends, and we started hanging out, and then I think we went to a couple movies together and hung out and watched movies here at my house, and she's great. And it was funny because a year or so ago, she was a super comic book nerd person, but she got really sick of comic book movies, and she's now like officially been burnt out, and she can't really get herself to see any more Marvel movies. And I was always like, "Come on, they're great, they're awesome." Like, I was always trying to motivate her. We would see other movies, and she loved anime. She loves, or I should say, she loves anime. She loves like comedy, some drama, some horror films. She's pretty much into all kinds of things. And so, so we had those interests too. But, and I remember when she went through this phase where she was so fatigued, I was always like, "Come on, oh, come on, they're still awesome. I get it. There's like, 100 million movies, 100 million Marvel movies out now, but I get it." But I kept trying to get her like to go, and fast forward about a year, I have reached that exact point. I'm in that same mindset where I'm just like kind of done, and I am not like fired up or enthusiastic about seeing any Marvel movies. There's a series of movies that I saw back to back, more or less, and I've been just really disappointed with them. And I just, ever since Endgame, which I thought was such a great, just kind of a masterpiece, ever since then, everything has been downhill for me, and I think it's just gotten worse. So I've reached that point to where I'm kind of like with her. I don't know if I can bring myself to go see a comic book movie. The one movie I've been wanting to see, but now I'm just like, I don't know, I'm not really excited about it, is Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I love James Gunn, one of my favorite directors, as far as newer directors. But it's a serious thing of fatigue. But we still go to the movies, Aaron and I, and we just saw about 3 or 4 weeks ago the new John Wick movie, Chapter 4, which is an action masterpiece, just an amazing film. I did a show on the page about that movie, and then last night we went to go see the new Nicolas Cage movie, Renfield. I've talked quite a bit about Nicolas Cage in the past, and he's one of my favorites. Hands down, he's like one of my favorite actors. I've always loved his stuff. I remember the first Nicolas Cage movie I ever saw was when I think I was in high school, and I think I saw it like on cable, and it was on HBO, and it was David Lynch's Wild at Heart. Nicolas Cage, Willem Dafoe, and Laura Dern. It was my first. Not only was it my first Nicolas Cage movie, but it was my first movie, my first David Lynch experience. And so it was unlike anything else that I'd ever seen in my life, and it was totally intense, beautiful, horrifying. Just a magical movie, so intense. But I had never seen anything like it. It was so unique. It was so different, and it was the first movie I saw Nicolas Cage in, and I got obsessed with that movie. And ever since then, I saw all of his other films. Everything from like Con Air to Face Off. I mean, National Treasure. I mean, the list is endless. Leaving Las Vegas. Um, Red Rock West, which is a earlier film that he did, which is a really awesome movie, super underrated. This real kind of indie film about like the small town kind of where all these murders happen. Really great, kind of like a film noir. Red Rock West, yeah, really great film, super underrated, pretty dark. But ever since then, Vampire's Kiss, I mean, the list is endless. He was in so many epic movies. And I've always loved him. I've loved him for when he, and to me, he's always been a chameleon. He can do, he hasn't done the big budget movies in a very long time, but the thing that I loved about him is that he can go into any world and just totally own that part, or totally own that role that he's playing. Whether it's this big, Jerry Bruckheimer action movie like, say, Con Air, or like a John Woo big budget action movie like Face Off, or do these tiny little independent films or these weird kind of art house films. And he's always amazing in it. And he won, obviously he won Best Actor for Leaving Las Vegas, which is, an amazing movie. Depressing and hard to watch, but an amazing movie. And I've always loved Nicolas Cage. I did a show about maybe a month or two ago on my favorite Nicolas Cage movie, and that is Mandy. That movie to me is just epic in every way. It's probably on my top five, definitely in my top 10 list. That movie would definitely make those lists as being one of my favorite films of all time. I just think that movie is an epic masterpiece. And the last 5 to 7 years, Nicolas Cage has really been involved with the indie world of filmmaking. He's really been diving into working with a lot of upcoming directors, films that tend to be a little bit more low budget. But the diversity of his career, just within the last few years, to me, is astounding. And and the diversity that he's been able to do, and taking, I feel like as an actor, he can do comedy, he can do drama, he can do horror, he can do, anything, the melodrama, action. I mean, you name it, any genre he can do. And he's funny, and he's got that classic, star presence, like, someone like iconic actors like, Steve McQueen, like, or like James Dean or Marlon Brando. Like, those actors just had this. Not only were they brilliant, but they just had this presence on screen that they could be just on screen, and there doesn't even have to be any dialogue, and they just command this presence. And I think Nicolas Cage has that same kind of fire to his whole thing. He's got that same ability. And even movies that I felt that he might have been in over the years or whatnot that I didn't really like, say, or he is usually always awesome in that film. And when I think about it, when I really think about I mean, such a huge, crazy legacy of a career he's had. When I think about all of the different films he's been in, I can't really think of a movie that he was in that I thought sucked. When I think about it, which is crazy. He was always awesome in it, but I can't really think of a movie that he was in that was terrible. So, and I saw an interview with him recently, and on Stephen Colbert, and Stephen Colbert was like, he was talking about, reflecting on his career, and like and Stephen Colbert was asking him what he felt his favorite movie roles were. And the first one he picked, which I thought was so awesome, was Mandy. He thought that was the best role he's ever been in, the best movie he's ever been in. I was like, that's pretty killer. And I 100% agree. Then he also said Pig, which to me, I have to agree. There's so many movies to choose from in his long career, so many decades, from the 80s, 90s to now. It's crazy. And Pig to me is another film that I consider a masterpiece. So unique, so different, such an original piece of film and of art that I almost feel like you can't compare it to anything. Like it's almost its own little weird genre of a film. But, again, I think that not enough people have seen these films, especially Pig. Amazing, amazing film. And so Mandy and Pig are my two favorite of his entire career. And Pig just came out very recently. The other film that he talked about was Face Off, which is just such an epic action movie directed by John Woo, and it was him, Nick Cage, and John Travolta. Amazing movie. So, and again, just naming those movies, they're all so incredibly different from each other. So I was super excited on the concept or the idea of thinking of him, Nicolas Cage, playing Dracula. He has said, I've seen interviews with him where he said he's always had a lifelong dream of playing Dracula someday, and then also playing Superman. There was a whole thing years and years ago where he was set to play Superman, and it was going to be directed by Tim Burton, and it looked wild. Like the whole concept of it looked just so interesting and unique and different, and just bonkers crazy. But it never happened. The whole thing fell through, and there's been lots of stories around that whole kind of collapse, which would have been amazing. But when I saw that he was doing this movie called Renfield, and he was getting a chance to play Dracula, I was just like, sold, instant, instantly going, instantly made up my mind. I'm going to see this, no questions asked, no matter what. And I have to say, my first reaction to this film when the credits came up was, this movie was a blast. It was totally fun. It's a black comedy. The thing that was so wild about this movie is how incredibly gory this film is. This movie pulls no punches as far as the gore. There's bodies exploding, there's limbs being ripped off. It's wild. It literally is an epic carnage horror film. There's there's so much gore in this film. It's just blood soaked from the beginning to the end, and that part alone was just amazing. And Nicolas Cage. There's some moments with him in this film where he plays Dracula that is just incredible. It's just amazing. Even in subtle little scenes, like the dialogue of him talking about who he is, and his kind of idea of self-preservation. I mean, it's amazing. And there's scenes also where he's not even his mannerisms are just so incredible, and you feel like he's paying homage to the classic, the original Nosferatu, also Bela Lugosi, and all of the other various wonderful Dracula movies that have come since then. Feels like he's paying homage to all of those personas, all of those personifications of Dracula throughout the years, but yet he does his own thing with it. And only an actor like Nicolas Cage can pull that off. And this just came out. It just came out on Friday, and we saw it last night, which was Wednesday. It was directed by Chris McKay, who I never heard of before. The story was written by Robert Kirkman. And yeah, this movie is just such a trip. It's so fun, twisted. The action sequences for the film are pretty bonkers, really impressive. And I've said too, I'm a old school fan of when it comes to say practical effects. Not a huge fan of CGI so much in the digital process or the digital format. I think there's been some really great films of where it's seamless. I think, well, getting back to comic book movies, to me, more modern day examples of that where it's incredibly successful are for the Marvel films, especially Infinity War and Endgame. I mean, just those movies are masterpieces, and I think the CGI is magical. And other films that I think of where the CGI is just amazing, and they also blend real practical effects also, especially in these films. But the original Lord of the Rings films, directed by Peter Jackson, there's also lots of actual sets that were built, and there's actually lots of practical effects in those films. But for the most part, it's CGI, and I think that those films are also examples of how you do it and how you do it really well, and that the technology is at its like apex and it's seamless. So with this film, there's no real practical effects. All of the effects, all of the gratuitous gore that's in this film, it's all CGI. But I have to say, it's so well done. And I'm not usually a big fan of a lot of films that use an abundance of CGI. And this film has a lot. Like, I was surprised. This film, obviously, it feels, I don't know, it feels like it's kind of a low budget film, but then it also feels like it's a really big budget film. It's got this interesting thing. And especially with the action. I didn't think that this film was going to be as action laden as it is, or action laden as it is, with giant, fight scenes, and I didn't think it was going to be as gory as it was. And so it's really high level. Like, I was impressed. And all of the practical effects, all of the effects, as far as I know, that involve the violence, are all CGI. And but I have to say, the CGI for this film is pretty incredible. I was really blown away by it. It's really great. It's really well done. As far as horror films go, I mean, I definitely consider this a horror film, even though it's like a black comedy and it's kind of a satire on, like, people who are, in these toxic relationships. It's still a horror movie, I think, at the core. And as far as the use of CGI in a horror film, as far as a newer film goes, I think this is the best I've seen. It's really impressive, and it was one of those films to see on the big screen, without a doubt. Because of the scope of it, it was a bigger film than I thought it was going to be. The cast is amazing for this film. Really great, really impressive. Nicolas Cage, what can you say about him? I mean, he's just so damn good. I can't, like, even before, or a couple minutes ago, you can't really, I can't really think of a movie that he's been in that sucks. Nicholas Hoult is also in this. He plays Renfield, and Nicholas Hoult is such a tremendous actor. He's kind of one of my favorite actors right now. The last movie I saw with him in it, which is another movie that I did a review on, which is another killer movie, another black comedy horror film, The Menu. Such a great movie. Totally original. One of the better movies I saw last year as far as horror films. It's definitely a horror film, but it's very funny. Again, it's a satire also on, kind of a critique on, you know, where we are as a culture. But at its core, it's definitely, a horror film. Aquafina is also in this. She's great. Huge fan of hers, and she's really funny in this film. Just really, really good cast. The chemistry between Nicolas Cage and Nicholas Hoult, Dracula and Renfield, is pretty awesome. Ben Schwartz is also in this, who is really great. He's been in a couple of high-profile TV shows, I believe, and also a few high-profile movies. Brendan Scott Jones, who I've never seen before, he was really great in it. The cast is just great, super entertaining. Definitely a film. Visually, it was an experience. It was definitely something to see on the big screen, especially the scope of it. But totally entertaining. And I love that. I loved how, sometimes when films are so over the top, they're hard to. There might be certain things about the film where you might be hard to latch on to it. But in this film is an example of where it's like way over the top. I mean, like way. It's almost like at a cartoon level. But I think it really works. I think it works. For what this movie is and what it deals with, and the kind of the way the whole story kind of unfolds. I think it totally works around, in those confines, being that it's so like, it almost has this carnival circus like kind of flair to it. But I think because it's so over the top, it still works. One of the criticisms I heard of this movie, which I thought was an interesting point, it's gotten some good reviews, but it's also gotten a couple of bad reviews. Nicolas Cage has a lot of his films have gotten that kind of flack, and a lot of films I feel are never given the praise that they deserve or the acclaim that they deserve. I think Mandy, for instance, Mandy has kind of gone on to become a cult hit, but still grossly underrated, grossly underappreciated. I think Pig is another film. He's, there's a handful of movies I can think of that seems to be a thing for his career. And he's kind of always been an underdog, and I think that's part of it too. But I think, well, the one criticism or criticisms I heard, Chris Stuckman, who I like a lot, he is a film reviewer who I follow quite a bit. He specializes in reviewing new films, so I usually check his stuff out pretty often for like new releases. And I did see a little review of Renfield before I saw it. I watched like a few, like maybe 2 minutes of it. Then I turned it off, and then that was it. And then I saw the movie last night. And then today, this morning, I watched the full review. And, for the most part, he said it was an awesome movie, a total like joyride of a film. But he had some criticisms, and he felt the criticisms were around. He felt like there was probably a lot of scenes cut out of the film, and he was talking about. He felt the pacing and the editing for the film were a little bit disjointed, and there wasn't a real conceptual flow to things. Like he felt things were happening so quickly, and he felt there could have been various build-ups to certain scenes that could have, maybe made the story even that more interesting. And, and I did see that part of his review before I saw the movie. And, I can kind of understand it. That's a pretty good argument, and I can understand that because the movie does have this pace of where it's kind of like rapid fire. The movie doesn't really slow down. It does go one thing into the next. There isn't any real downtime of where suddenly there's just, well, there is, but traditionally there isn't that thing of where there's all this downtime and and kind of where people are talking in a room for a long period of time, or talking about the story or where where they're going as a character, or you get some backstory. It's pretty much like from the beginning of the movie, you're strapped in, and they're just taking on a ride. And I can kind of see that argument. I can kind of see that maybe certain scenes where, the editing, like things happen really quickly. There isn't necessarily a build up for certain things. And I can understand that, but I also feel like, well, maybe that was intentional. Maybe there wasn't things cut out of the film because they maybe messed up or whatever. I think that maybe there wasn't any editing or major cuts to the film. Maybe they wanted, and the one sense that I got was maybe they wanted this film to just move really, really fast. And so I can understand an argument. Like, things do happen quickly as far as where there's different arcs in the character and different situations. But it didn't take me out of the movie, honestly. I didn't. After I got to a certain point, everything started to really be, for me, really cohesive, and I kind of understood, the whole premise of the story. Because there's kind of like two stories going on, but suddenly I felt like, after a while of watching the film, I was like, okay, I'm getting what's going on. And I feel like the chemistry and the acting is so great, and the writing is really great, and the gore is so great that I didn't really stop to look at, oh, well, maybe they could have gone to this scene could have been longer, or maybe they should have drawn this particular area of the movie out, for maybe a little bit more of a character thing, or a character to see a character, some kind of character arc to where you would see them moving into a different direction. It didn't take me out of that, but I can see that as being a little bit of a criticism. But overall, I thought this movie was just super fun, and it just delivered the goods. I thought, and it's great. It's definitely a black comedy, has it's definitely a satire, and but it's definitely a horror movie, and I was blown away, really, really surprised by the sheer level of gore in this film. Like, it's outrageous. So, and Nicolas Cage again, amazing, amazing. So I highly recommend this film. It's definitely see it in the theater. It's visually, it's pretty stunning. Nicolas Cage can't do anything wrong as far as I'm concerned, and this is a killer movie. So this is Jason Dean, Film Fanatic. So it should be in the theaters. Renfield should be in the theaters for a while longer. It just came out this past Friday, so hasn't even been out a week. But if you get a chance, please check it out. If you like this page, please subscribe and keep the comments coming, and we will see you next time. Peace.